Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Welcome into Soccer Morning on the North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. And yes, if you have navigated to NASN.TV in the last couple of days, you are being asked for a password and a username. Just ignore it. We're moving our servers. It's taking a little longer than we wanted it to, but it's coming along. And pretty soon you'll have access again. What this also means, unfortunately, is our iTunes feed isn't going to fill your Soccer Morning needs at the moment. Neither will any RSS feeds. We're getting on it. Trust me, we're getting on it. And we will find a way for you to get this show in audio form after the fact today. If NASN.TV is still replicating or whatever technology words indicate exactly what's going on there. Trevor knows them. I don't know them. I don't have any idea what's happening there. Something about infrastructure and server, I don't know, whatever. Something like that. So it is a Monday. We are back on the air. I'm excited for today's show. We have a killer lineup of guests. Charlie Boehm will join me in a couple minutes to review the MLS weekend, and it was a weekend marked by fantastic goals. You had Obafemi Martins, you had Federico Higuain, you had Vincent Nogueira, you had Jermaine Defoe with a rocket, as well as Toronto beat New York. So we'll talk to Charlie about all of those games, the implications therein, what it's like watching a league that is missing so many of its star players. The impact of the World Cup on MLS is not just about those star players who have already gone and weren't there for their teams this weekend. It was evident in the players who stuck around for one more game before leaving for their camp, and I'm speaking specifically of Boniek Garcia, the Houston Dynamo winger, who is crucial to that team, especially with Brad Davis already at US camp. And as the Dynamo went up against LA at the BBVA Compass Stadium on Saturday, he pulls up lame with no contact. This wasn't a contact injury. This looks like maybe he possibly could have had a muscle tweak. Maybe. Possibly. I mean, I can't know for certain the guy's faking it, and I'm not really saying he is. I'm saying he felt a twinge, and he immediately put his hands up in the international symbol for get me off the field and get somebody else on, even though it did not seem as if his injury was significant. He didn't pull up lame and drop to the ground. He sort of just kind of hobbled for a second. Well, just a little tweak. But the man's going to a World Cup. He's not going to want to jeopardize that at all. So, of course, he went down. Of course he asked for a change because he's not going to jeopardize it. That was the impact of the World Cup on this MLS weekend, in addition to all of those guys who weren't there. Some teams did okay without their stars. Some teams did not. All of that gets reviewed with Charlie Boehm in a couple of minutes. Also on this show, David Cartledge to talk about the end of the La Liga season. Atletico Madrid goes to Barcelona, gets the draw they need to win the title. First title in 18 years. First team to win La Liga that is not named Barcelona or Real Madrid in 10 years, when Valencia won it in 2003-2004. We'll talk about the injuries that Atletico was hit by, because that impacts the Champions League final, which is coming up. And Atletico Madrid has the chance to do an amazing double that no one could have seen coming. And it's interesting. Yeah, Diego Costa, there are players, quality players, amazing players at Atletico Madrid. But because they don't seem to have that transcendent star, the star of the team becomes Diego Simeone. So we'll talk to David Cartledge about all of that. Perhaps we'll touch on, in addition to that, we'll touch on the Spain side that will be going to the World Cup, attempting to do something unimaginable, and that's win a third major tournament in a row. Remember, they won a Euro, they won a World Cup, and they won another Euro. Can they do a fourth? That would clearly and without a doubt make them one of the greatest national team sides of all time. They may already be there. I mean, we can reach back into history and start looking at some of those teams. I mean, the Brazil teams, the late 60s, early 70s, obviously winners. We're talking about winners here. You can be great, but if you don't win, doesn't count as much. So where does Spain rank in that regard? And we'll, again, certainly talk about their squad that they're taking to the World Cup this summer. And then later in the show, Andrew Mengen from Arsblog will join us to talk about Arsenal season, capping it off with an FA Cup win over Hull City on Saturday. It took a little more than maybe they thought they'd need. Aaron Ramsey's the hero. And Aaron Ramsey is not English, by the way, just in case anybody was confused out there. I don't know. If you watch the American broadcast, maybe you were confused about Aaron Ramsey and where he's from. He's Welsh. So we'll talk to Andrew about that. And Arsene Wenger in line for an extension. Should he get one? Does he deserve one? Of course he does. But what does this mean for Arsenal going forward? Because this isn't transition. Look, first cup in first trophy of any kind in 9 years for Arsenal. But it immediately becomes about next season. And while the FA Cup is a prestigious trophy, it is not the league. It is not the Champions League. Those are the goals. When you are Arsenal, your goals are always about winning the top titles, and that's the league and that's the Champions League, and they'll have a chance to do both again next season. What will Arsene Wenger do this summer to bolster that team, to get them ready to climb back up that ladder and challenge? Today's big news, this morning's big news, it's morning here, it's afternoon in England, is Louis van Gaal named officially as Manchester United manager. He takes over from David Moyes, who was obviously fired. Ryan Giggs, who was the interim manager for the last couple of games, will be his assistant coach. I have no idea if that means he's still going to play, because I haven't seen that yet. Maybe that's coming out now. And we'll keep an eye on this. But Louis van Gaal stepping in. Look, this is a good thing for Manchester United. If you're a Manchester United fan, you should be excited about Louis van Gaal coming in. It is an upgrade over David Moyes. He is a manager who knows how to win things. He will have the ability to get you where you're going if they fix that team, because there's some issues, clearly. Center of midfield. Do they have the center backs? The question now, for me, is whether or not Manchester United is just like everybody else. Has the bloom come off the rose? And maybe that's not a big thing. Maybe that's not a problem. Giggs is retiring. Thanks, Nick and Toledo, for that on Twitter. Maybe it's not a big thing that Manchester United takes a step from the exceptional into the usual. I mean, they're going to be. Louis van Gaal signed a deal for 3 years. You can't imagine him sticking around for much more than that if he does get an extension. He's an old manager. I mean, I don't know how old he is. How old is Louis van Gaal? Somebody get me that information. But he's not young by any stretch. He's not a guy you're going to have installed for 10, 15, 20 years. He's not going to grow old in the job. He's already 62 years old. And he'll probably get an itch and he'll want to go do something else. That's probably coming. So if that's the case, and I know Manchester United before Alex Ferguson wasn't exceptional by any stretch. I mean, they had a rich history, but it wasn't built on a manager there for a quarter century, the way that Alex Ferguson was. But Alex Ferguson's tenure set Manchester United apart. Louis van Gaal steps in. I'm not worried about what's next, because we have to see what Van Gaal does. But does Manchester United then become Chelsea? Do they become Liverpool? Do they become a team that is no different than any other when it comes to their managerial turnover, the feeling of what that club is? For the fans, it won't change. The club is the club. They love their Manchester United. Fine. Probably doesn't matter to them that Van Gaal will leave eventually. Yeah, they were spoiled by Ferguson. They understand it's a new era. Maybe it's not an issue. Maybe it's not an issue. Now, let's take a break. When we come back, we will grab Charlie Bohm from MLSsoccer.com and Soccer Wire and U.S. Soccer Players, and we will talk to him about this MLS weekend. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Be right back.
Flashcards.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
I got it. We're doing MLS. I got to play Kwame Darko's anthem. Bet they see me now. On the line with me now, Charlie Boehm from MLSsoccer.com, Soccer Wire, U.S. soccer players. Follow him on Twitter, CBOEHM. Charlie, how are you on a Monday? Excuse me.
Yes, I'm well, thank you, Jason.
You are well. Okay. Your signal's probably my fault, but your signal's not the best. Hopefully it comes up and gets a little bit better. All right. We just got through the first.
Okay.
The first.
Keep me in the loop. Okay.
All right. The first MLS weekend without all of the World Cup departures. In most part, there were a couple of guys who hung around for one more game. Does that change how you view the results? And we'll get to those.
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, inevitably it affects the way you look at the results. But you know, this is a rather large obstacle on that's been on the calendar for some time now, and so it is a rather unique problem, or a fairly unique problem for MLS. Dealing with World Cup absences, but it's not an unexpected one. And I think you really start to see who's built their team most effectively to deal with this. So certainly you did see a couple of really strong teams who have carried more internationals on their roster who suffered a bit over the weekend. Mm-hmm. But once again, you've got to prepare for this moment.
It seems it seems to be jumping the gun if we look at the results and we look at the teams that navigated the departure of some stars well and say, well, that clearly indicates they're doing something right. I mean, in some cases that might be true, but you never know. And then it might be wrong to jump ahead and say, well, anybody who suffered without their stars is doing something wrong, because there are, whether or not you could have, you knew this was coming, preparing for it is a different story.
Well, and the axe falls in different ways and unexpectedly. I mean, DC United and most of the rest of us thought that they'd be without Eddie Johnson at this stage. Mm-hmm. I think the Sounders at one point had reason to believe that Obafemi Martins would not be around, and it looked quite possibly like Jermaine Defoe would be heading out over to join England right around now. All three of those guys were snubbed by their national teams, and all three of them scored and played influential roles in results this weekend. I think that. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's nice when things come together and we get a theme that we can pull out. The snubs all scored. Here's your theme.
Right. But to some extent, it's valid to say that. Those players are given an even bigger stage to shine, because of, the little bit of space having opened up elsewhere in their team. I mean, Seattle, let's give them credit, for building a roster that I think even if Obafemi Martins was not on the field on Saturday, they'd go into that game feeling pretty good about things, feeling good about their chances, as opposed to on the other side, San Jose, I think only traveled with 16, were woefully understaffed, played like it, set themselves up tactically like it, and they've had some World Cup losses, but shouldn't be anything. But then, other injuries elsewhere, other problems, conspire to make life harder for them. So, there's certainly an element of chance in this, but there's also a question of depth and finding affordable talent, which remains one of the most important traits you can have in an MLS, roster builder.
Yeah, spare a thought for the champs as well, who went to Chicago with essentially no center backs. They ended up starting Eric Palmer-Brown, who's 17, and yes, Juventus has been sniffing around, but he clearly has a lot of maturing to do. They toss him into the fire, no pun intended, and he has what it might be one of the worst debuts in MLS history. 2 penalties that are his fault, ends up getting sent off for 2 yellow cards. He's going to have better days. I imagine he'll be fine, but that's sort of right there in a nutshell is this period with these. And look, Sporting had injuries as well. It's not just about their international absences, but when these things conspire together, that's what you get. And
let's claim a break. The young men did have a tough afternoon a role in 2 goals, penalty kick goals, and sending off. But he lasted longer than a minute, which is more than we can say for Corbin Bone, who he was red carded almost immediately, literally, after coming on as a substitute for the Philadelphia Union on Wednesday against KC, as they were trying to defend a lead in a very difficult situation. So, a lot of players will have those moments in their careers.
Absolutely. Now, as we look at these results, I'm going to start with events in Portland. It seems no matter how hard they try, no matter how much they work at it, wins are just going to be incredibly tough for the Portland Timbers. They go up a goal at one point and immediately give up the equalizer to Columbus on the other end. I mean, if you blinked, you missed Columbus scoring their equalizer. What is? I mean, I don't know if we can pull anything out, if there's a string to a thread to grab when it comes to the Timbers, but they just continually do this. I mean, I know they beat DC United, but this is back to what they were, and 7 draws, and it's just not working. What did you take away from that game?
Yeah, Will Johnson gave us maybe the line of the year when he said about his own team, the Timbers, we have the heart of a lion, but the brain of a goldfish sometimes. They were, those games are almost always fun to watch, the games at Providence Park. There's such a great atmosphere. Wild stuff tends to happen on those matches. But that is in and of itself a challenge for the home team. They were very resourceful, and I think Columbus probably, the team in a very similar situation, really needed 3 points. Really has reason to feel disappointed about blowing a chance at 3 points, even though they're coming away from a road match with 1. Myself and other members of the MLS Soccer Match Night staff were debating whether Portland is going to be a playoff team this year. And, the simple fact that we're having that conversation here in late May says a lot. They certainly have ample talent. I would say this about the Crew as well. These are 2 teams that have substantial amounts of talent, a very pleasing, very effective when it's executed properly, tactical kind of concepts. But they are finding ways to drop points, and at some point there's a table math here that kicks in where the mountain gets steeper and steeper for them to climb. It's not too early to say that they're both those teams and several others around the league are entering crisis zone in terms of looking ahead. Are one of our goals, and I'd say for the Timbers, one of their basic goals is reaching the postseason. That is now in jeopardy given the trend line. So something dramatic has to happen. They've already brought in Adi, the big Nigerian striker. There will probably be other moves ahead. Either they're going to have to bring in new faces who can change the narrative, or they're going to have to change it from within. And certainly that's been a tough task thus far.
They were hurt by a red card, Alvis Powell, with just a horrific decision. I mean, it looked worse than it was because of the tumble by Barson, but that's just not a smart foul in that position.
Right, horrific decision by the player, not the referee. Let's be clear.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely, bad decision by Alvis Powell. Put his team behind the 8 ball. And you look at at Portland, and you would think that with the international period coming up, with the World Cup coming up, they should be in a good position. They don't have anybody that they're losing that's been playing for them. I mean, they may have lost Rodney Wallace if he was healthy, but in this case, they should be at full strength. And they're playing a team in the Crew who lost Michael Parkhurst to USA camp, who didn't have Waylon Francis. They had Giancarlo Gonzalez for one more match, but I can't remember exactly what happened with him. He may have come off injured at one point. Seems to be that was a theme around the league. Guys leaving for World Cup action didn't want to go real hard on Saturday. So that is certainly a lost opportunity for the Timbers. And you look at the West, Charlie. I mean, the fact that the Timbers and the Galaxy are at the bottom. Now, I know the Galaxy have only played 8 games, but they went to Houston and they looked dreadful. And some questions over how Bruce Arena used Robbie Keane in that game.
Well, to be honest with me, I would come at it from a different angle. To me, that game was LA's for the taking. They broke down Houston repeatedly. Both teams made some fairly disastrous-looking errors, and as it turned out, LA's was punished finally. But I thought Houston were really off color, and I thought LA would take at least a point from that match from the section that I watched. Mistakes happen though. Just like the injuries, we're getting into a stage of the season where a mileage is ticking up, and there's the physical mileage that leads to bodies breaking down, and there's physiological and psychological mileage where small waver in focus, little mental breakdowns can become very costly. And in LA's case, it only took one, although there were others. I think LA. I was actually stunned to go check on the table and realize that they had slipped all the way to the bottom now, alone at the bottom. And they're down there with the Timbers, two very good teams. I mean, I think you can ask a lot of questions about, at this stage at least, we can ask questions about the off-season acquisitions, the off-season remodeling or tweaking those two teams did. Clearly, not everything has come off. Maybe there's still time for things to gel a little bit on both sides there, but my previous doubts have so far been confirmed about whether LA really upgraded to the level that they needed to. Were their upgrades actually upgrades?
Yeah.
I think it's changed the way they play a bit. It's certainly they were trying to figure out a way to play without Landon Donovan, expecting he'd be gone, and it certainly looks like he'll be gone, although it's not guaranteed that he'll make the U.S. 23-man roster. But I thought LA took a step back tactically with the moves they made in this offseason, and I've yet to have that view dissuaded.
Now, obviously, we had a bunch of great goals. Have to stop for a minute and just recognize Obafemi Martins with that insane goal against the Earthquakes. You had Higuain in Portland with his patented ship. He's got that down. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen a player who is so willing to try it and so successful at it. I mean, his conversion rate has to be insane when compared to anybody else. You had Jermaine Defoe with a rocket for the TFC as they beat New York. That game, obviously Toronto, no Michael Bradley, but you would imagine New York should be competitive. What did you make briefly about of TFC's win over the Red Bulls?
Well, the Red Bulls really didn't show up. Thierry Henry was excellent, but the rest of his team didn't give him the support he deserved. He laid a few balls on platters. Bradley Wright Phillips had the miss of the year of the season to date, which you would not expect from a guy who scored as much as he has lately. TFC though, I think they're flattering to deceive. Even now, I mean, they're sitting in mid-table. They're 4-4. They certainly made improvements, but their tactical outlook is very simple. They are seeking midfield turnovers, and they want to find Defoe in the channels. Quick transitions, create one-on-one or break situations for Defoe. He is excellent. He will take his chances, maybe the most efficient chance finisher in the league at the moment, maybe in general. But Toronto is gonna get found out, I think, if they don't add a little bit more to their game and get more performance out of some of their other players, maybe not the DPs, but some of those guys like Alvaro Rey and who need to come in and give support to Defoe, and of course Bradley is going to be gone. So TFC is an interesting case, but I think they're going to be a little bit of maybe there's drama ahead up there on the lake.
New England Revolution 5, Philadelphia Union 3. The Revs, the hottest team in MLS, 10 goals scored in their last 2 games. They are once again sort of the it boys of MLS. They were getting a lot of preseason hype based on what they did last year. It took them a little while to get started, but everything is clicking again. And for me, Charlie, what stands out is Patrick Mullins, who has become a very effective striker for them up top. Now he's coming out of college. He's a rookie. Maybe he hits the wall eventually, and they'll have to deal with that. The other thing for me that's interesting is Kellen Rowe's not fully integrated yet. They have Teal Bunbury playing on the wing, which is interesting and effective so far.
It's working. Yeah. I mean, they're a fun team to watch. I still think not enough people are watching them. Go watch the highlights of this match. Go try and catch them. If you can watch some MLS matches, or you're looking for a team to kind of pay attention to and learn from. They remain a critic's darling. I think much like Vancouver in the West, where they're just so fun to watch. I mean, they've got a lot of young talent. Jay Heaps has given young guys a try, and he's brought in a lot of technical players and figured out a way to get them all working together well. I mean, Lee Wen is probably an MVP front runner at the moment for the entire league. And teams that don't watch the Revolution may not be ready to accept that yet, but he has been absolutely outstanding on both sides of the ball. technical, inventive, playing with flair. He was utterly dominant on that pitch in Philly. And then there's so many other guys that can do, similar guys that do what he does. And bringing Mullins, pulling Bunbury out of that lone striker position and bringing Mullins up top, who's a rookie but is an extremely intelligent player. And I got to tell you, I did some scouting interviews over the winter ahead of the draft. Got to talk to a bunch of coaches about a bunch of different members of this rookie class. And I had a very experienced coach who worked with Mullins at the youth level on a regional level, who said it is strictly a matter of time before he's in the national team pool, before he's contributing to the national team. Not just because of his finishing instincts, which he saw in college, but his soccer IQ is off the charts. He's so intelligent. He's such a well put together guy. Very smart on and off the field. So I'm very intrigued to watch his career. And right now he has been sort of that missing link for the Revs to really click.
It's fascinating to watch a group of guys, and Lee Nguyen's not a young player by any real measure, but he's obviously got plenty left in his tank. And you have Mullins, and you have
27, something like that.
27. You have Diego Fagundes, who obviously is a wonderkid. It is a fascinating team to watch as they sort of all grow into this. I mean, Lee Nguyen coming back, rough start to his MLS career with the Vancouver situation, but has landed in a perfect place. The game looks easy for him. When you can look at a player and just say it looks easy, that's when they're at the top of their game. It's fantastic to watch the Revolution. All right. While I got a couple of minutes with Charlie, I definitely want to touch on something local. If we missed your MLS team's game, I apologize. Can't get to all of them. But Charlie's a DC guy, and there's some news out this morning via the Washington Post that seems to indicate, and here's your headline, sources, DC United and district government finalizing stadium deal. Finalizing is a loaded word, Charlie. Should we be excited about this?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is no. I'm not excited about this at all. This actually makes me sad reading this report. So here we are, as the report alluded to, 10 months after Mayor Vincent Gray's office, with almost no notice, scheduled a press conference in an empty parking lot in Southwest DC and announced that this is going to be the home of the next DC United Stadium. Very suddenly last summer, we got this word that the city was on board after literally years of DC United looking for a meaningful, permanent partnership with the city of DC. It happened all of a sudden. And then when we got into the gritty details, it became clear that the deal wasn't actually done. The various property owners hadn't all agreed to terms on the land. The city council was going to have to sign off on the whole thing, and that we were nowhere near that. So the idea was to bring something before the council some point last fall. The city and less so DC. I mean, DC now is kind of stuck in the passenger seat here. They're working with the city. They're going to sign off on a deal, obviously. But this all comes down to Mayor Gray's office pushing this. And Alan Liu is his sort of designated fixer, the guy who made the Nats Park happen. He's made a lot of projects around this town happen. He's a smart guy, and he's in charge of this process. But they've missed their own deadlines. The council has had time to think about this and gradually build opposition. We've already had a mayoral primary. Mayor Gray managed to lose that mayoral primary. And I think that the handling of the stadium shows a little bit of why he did not defend his incumbency. We had corruption charges as well. But the fact that we're still agreeing a deal between the team and the city 10 months after that announcement, and this still has to go through the council. And Mayor Gray is a lame duck. And the longer this goes, the less likely it is to pass. The front runner, the most likely candidate to succeed him, the one who knocked him off in the Democratic primary, Muriel Bowser, has been the most vocal opponent so far of the stadium on the council. She's a current member of the council. She can keep this from even happening if she really wants to. And no one has any reason to work with Gray on this. There's no power. There's no real impetus. So if this doesn't get done very quickly and doesn't get spun very effectively in such a way that it gets the council votes, it's not going to happen. That doesn't mean the stadium will not happen,
right,
but the deal as we know it could fundamentally change both now and 10 months or so in the future when we have a new mayor in charge. So it's a sign of progress, but it's sad that we're calling this progress. That tells you how rough this road has been here in DC.
Until no matter what this story says, and I am not doubting the writing of Jonathan O'Connell, but no matter what this story says, until the plan is in front of the council and there's some real reason to believe it might pass, there's nothing to get excited about. There just isn't. And I feel for DC United fans, and obviously being a guy based in the area, I have a soft spot for the team. I have a soft spot for the fans. I feel for them because they just constantly get yanked back and forth over this. And I've wondered for years when the breaking point will be for the league and for whoever's owning the team at the time. And I'm not saying we're there. But if this deal doesn't go through, Charlie, there is a future where DC United can't exist in this town.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but that's true. I mean, we talk about RFK being financially unsustainable, but now the last few years, I went to a game as a fan a couple months ago, and I've been around this team and in this city on this beat since 2004. From then to now, there's been a steady sort of decline. Not only, I mean, the stadium is getting older, obviously, but the city and the team are doing everything they can to keep the overhead down and to keep the cost down. And that directly at some point has impacted the fan experience, right? So, there's this sort of dwindling process where everyone's been treading water for so long now. It's hard to imagine the status quo, dramatically changing, but it's going to have to. And either that means the stadium gets built and they're in it by 2017, 2018, or the ownership has to make some hard decisions, or the ownership group changes entirely because Eric Toh here, the money man behind the team at the moment, is not going to wait around on this forever, and he's not going to stomach a losing financial proposition.
Yeah, and he's already got interest in Italy now with Inter Milan, and you wonder how much of his attention he can give and whether or not it just might be in his best interest to move this along. But who's going to step up and take over? That's a question. The league is taking over one team this season. We'll see if that's something that might happen. I mean, like, I don't want to doomsday this too much, and I know, but
we're not to doomsday yet. But certainly the next 10 months are very crucial. If anything, if I could say anything positive, it would be that Bowser is going to run, and she says she's for keeping United in DC. She says that she thinks there could be a stadium deal, but she's taken issue with the dirty details of this specific proposal that Gray has built.
Yeah.
Her opponent, then there's actually going to be apparently a meaningful competition in the mayoral general election between a Democrat and she is the Democrat nominee, and David Catania, who is an independent, who's going to run against her in the fall. So we're actually going to have a meaningful election. Usually these are decided at the primary level here in DC because it's such a blue town. But Catania is an even more vocal opponent of the stadium than she is. He is a no stadium subsidies period under any circumstances kind of guy. And so maybe that will, that could move Bowser in one direction or another here. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if she's going to try and crystallize her opposition or, the contrast between her and him, or she's going to disavow herself of the stadium to try and keep it from becoming a meaningful issue. Yeah. But certainly there's a lot of drama ahead, and I'll be surprised if Gray can get this done before he leaves. But if he does, it will be an enormous break for DC United.
Yeah, Charlie Bohm from MLSsoccer.com, SoccerWire.com, USSoccerPlayers.com. Go follow him on Twitter. Appreciate your time as always, Charlie. Thanks a lot.
It's a pleasure, Jason.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll shift our focus to Spain and talk about the La Liga champions, Atletico Madrid. They're heading into a Champions League final very, very soon, and we'll touch on Spain's World Cup squad with David Cartledge. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, SoccerMorning.com.
I turn my camera on. I cut my fingers on the way. lie, y'all. Here comes my boys, plug 3 and 2. My name's plug 1.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, we turn now to Spain. We've grabbed our favorite Spanish football expert, David Cartledge. Follow him on Twitter. It's David Jaca. David, how are you this afternoon? Excuse me.
It's okay. I'm very good, thank you. Yes, morning, afternoon, doesn't matter. I'm feeling very good, thank you.
How are you on this fine Monday? Let's say it that way. It is a fine Monday for Atletico Madrid, who have been crowned La Liga champions by virtue of a 1-1 draw with Barcelona. It was hard fought, just like much of their season. They nearly lost it on a goal that maybe should have been allowed, and we'll get to that in a second. But put this achievement for Atleti in context for me, David. It's been 18 years since they've won it. They're the first non-Barcelona Real Madrid team to win La Liga in 10 years.
That's right. 18 years later since their last title. And I think it's probably one of the most momentous days in Spanish football history. I don't think there's any way we can't understate the achievement by this team, and especially in this era at the moment of Spanish football that we've discussed on the show in terms of the power that Barcelona and Real Madrid both have over the rest of the league. For Atletico Madrid to do this is just an astonishing achievement.
Now, in terms of the actual game, you had the amazing goal by Alexis Sanchez, you had an equalizer from Atleti, and then you have, is it controversial there, that goal that Messi may or may not have scored fairly based on perhaps the ball coming off of an Atletico defender?
No, it hasn't really been discussed. No, I mean, I think it just really hasn't been out there. Everything's been really focused on Atleti's achievement and the situation that Barcelona are in as well. And the Barcelona players after, they said, look, Atleti deserved it. It's simple as that. They deserve to win this league. They have worked so hard for it, and the applause, the acceptance they got as well from the home crowd in the Camp Nou was quite something as well. I think that was striking as well. I think there was an acceptance on the part of everybody at Barcelona that, okay, this is not our time right now, and it's gone to a very, very worthy champion.
It was certainly one of those great moments. It sort of defies your expectations, because we live in a world where tribalism is such a daily worry in the world of football, David, and to see the crowd at the Camp Nou stand up, give their applause to a champion, a team that had just not bested their team, but bested their team over the course of the season, was amazing. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it really was. I mean, even the closing moments of that game, the tension that was packed in that stadium was just absolutely incredible. And there was a moment you thought, my God, they're gonna drop it. Barcelona are gonna score. They're gonna irk this one out, and they just didn't. And Atleti just kept fighting and fighting, and they just seemed to grow in strength towards the end. And again, it's this adversity that's made Atleti almost as well as the caution of Diego Simeone. They just thrive on the adversity like I've seen few teams ever do in any sport, or any individual thrive on adversity. And Atleti have just really taken it and used it to their good, basically.
I mean, it seemed fitting almost that Atletico Madrid had to deal with the injuries and the substitutions in that game that they did in order to achieve their ultimate goal.
Oh, of course, yeah. It's almost like sacrifice as well as another strength. All these words, sacrifice, this hard work, this team ethic. Okay, we've lost Costa, we've lost Ada. Let's just pull together here again. Even make us even more of a tighter unit. Should we let this defeat us? No, let's just pull together like we've done all season. There's no way we're going to let it go now. And you could see that was the mindset, and they worked so hard to do that. Felipe Luis, the left back, absolutely charging up the field into Barcelona's box in the 90th minute. I mean, that just said it all, really. He's absolutely flung himself into everything like everybody has this season, and that was a brilliant fight as well.
Now, this season's not over for Atletico Madrid yet. They've won one title, lifted one trophy, but they have another one yet to play for. Of course, the Champions League final in Lisbon against Real Madrid. Everything Madrid leading up to that. I mean, how quickly does focus shift? How quickly can they sort of say, all right, we've done celebrating La Liga, and let's go win this other thing?
Yeah, I mean, Gabi was on the radio last night, and Atleti fans celebrate in an area called Neptuno in Madrid, and he said, "Look, we'll see you here again next week." And the focus is immediately on that. Okay, they've had the celebrations, but right now they've got an even bigger challenge now, I think. And you know what? I mean, if you contrast the two situations at the clubs, the joy and the feeling around Atleti at the moment, and then you've got reports of unrest at Real Madrid in terms of Florentino Perez just saying, "Look what's happened. Why have we tailed off so badly at the end of this season? Why did we let the league go in such a..." The fashion that Real Madrid basically gave up the league was poor. They should have been involved. They should have had a part to play in this final weekend, and they didn't. And Perez is unhappy at that, given how brilliant Real Madrid did look a couple of weeks ago, and then suddenly they've just disintegrated massively, and it's really, really strange. And maybe that's the difference of a motivator in terms of what Simeone can get out of you as an individual.
Yeah, Real Madrid finishing third, I mean, on the same points as Barcelona, but just behind them in the ultimate table, and that's no consolation, clearly. And again, maybe is that indicative of some attitude at Real Madrid? They still have Europe's top title to play for, and they're talking about unrest at the club. It's fundamentally Real Madrid some way. Yeah,
I mean, I think there just needs to be a realization that how big this is. This is the La Decima for them. This is the closest. This is the closest they've ever got for quite some time, and especially in terms of how strong the squad is. They just have to really focus. I think that's why Florentino Perez actually organised this meeting with everybody, coaching staff, playing staff, Carlo Ancelotti obviously, and just said, "Look guys, do you realise what's on the line here?" Because I think for a moment, I mean, you look outside individuals like maybe Xabi Alonso and Cristiano Ronaldo, and then these people are just such big figures, and you know they are going to be there, and they're going to be trying to focus, and it's a case of them nearly pulling everybody else up as well, and it's just such a magnificent opportunity, and they can really, I mean, not to bring the Barca factor into it, but if Real Madrid can get a trophy as well, and that's Barcelona that's Real Madrid won a trophy, Atletico Madrid won a trophy, and they can come away again with they've already won the Copa del Rey, but this Champions League is just huge to them, in terms of the history, in terms of their destiny. It matters so much to them.
I love narratives, David. Sometimes they're overstated, but I love talking about them anyway and sort of a meta look at it. And as we head to this Champions League final, one of the narratives that strikes me is the overwhelming star power of Real Madrid, as they are, whether they're the Galacticos or not. They still have Ronaldo. They still have Bale. They still have these immense stars. And while there are star players at Atletico Madrid, it's much more of a team-focused idea there, with Simeone as sort of the star.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, he's brought. I mean, obviously they've got people like Costa, who's become a huge star, but it's always the team first, and this is just such a massive factor in terms of getting them this success, and that's more than anything. I mean, we can talk about the good seasons of certain players, and we can talk about somebody might be getting a big move somewhere else, and maybe certain players do look bigger, but I think within the dressing room, within Atleti, you just know for a fact there is nobody walking around there saying, "Look, I'm bigger than you, I'm earning more than you, I'm better than you. You need to pull your ideas up and get to my level." Because I think they've pulled in one direction for so long, and now we're seeing the conclusion of that, and the results could be, well, historical. They've already made history, but I mean, if they were to win the Champions League, it would just be. I mean, you really can't understand it. I think it'd be one of the greatest feats in the modern football area, if all time. It's huge. It really is that big.
I think it's difficult to overstate it. Now, as we get closer to Saturday and a Madrid derby for Europe's top title, I wonder, maybe you can sort of outline for people who aren't really aware how Atletico Madrid exists within Madrid. I mean, Real Madrid is such a presence, and they are the biggest club probably in the world. What's the relationship within the city, and is there a distinction between what you usually get from an Atleti fan versus what you would usually expect the type to be a Real Madrid fan?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody paints themselves out to be types. I mean, without going into too many generalizations, Atleti really put themselves out as the poor people in the city, basically, and they are looked down upon. I mean, their nickname is the mattress makers, you know, the Colchoneros, the mattress makers, and that pretty much sums it up from that point of view there for the nickname. But the tag has been a strange one for them, because sometimes you get a tag like that and you run with it, and then maybe you fight more, and you have, in terms of adversity, it should be there. But it's only really come in until Simeone has actually come into the club, and he's galvanised everybody, and he said, look, we might be this, we're not the small team here. We shouldn't be acting like this. And he's changed, even if they won nothing this season, what he has done is change the identity of that club from feeling sorry for ourselves, for saying, oh, look at Real Madrid, they're doing this. It doesn't matter, we're still the best fans, so it doesn't really matter. But Simeone said, look, you're the best fans, but you're also the best club in Madrid. And he's made people believe that. And that has gone some managers, I don't think any managers really tried to do it. There's probably Luis Aragonés, who used to say Luis Aragonés didn't like this tag that Atleti had as being this poor, feel sorry for himself club. He used to say, look, you're a big club too, and you could have everything that Real Madrid could as well, with these fans behind you. And that's what Simeone has basically got hold of, and he's brought out that mentality, what Aragonés wanted to get, and he did get for a while. And that's what's so special, basically. So it's definitely more of a poorer tag that Atleti certainly have in the city.
Now, this is a situation, we've talked about it before, what the possible fallout is across a greater timeline. And Atletico Madrid is, the fact that they've won this title and the fact that they're playing in the Champions League final with a chance to win it will only put a bigger spotlight on whether or not this achievement and this season in La Liga is actually a harbinger for things to come, because Atletico Madrid, for all their success, is still loaded with debt, still have a lot of issues in terms of administration, and you always have the TV imbalance in Spain. Is this something that will actually take, and whether it's Atletico Madrid staying in this group and perhaps making it a big three in Spain, or if it's maybe somebody else next year has a chance to pull an Atletico Madrid? Is there something we can see in the future based on what we've seen this year?
Well, I think Atleti's future, I think they actually can survive in terms of the finances, what they have got. I think they can survive. I think the big factor is that Diego Simeone sticks around. I think that is when a problem will be. I think Costa can leave. I think Koke can leave. These players can be replaced, and I think the ideology and the identity that Simeone has created is so strong. The new players can come in and they will believe and fall into that straight away, as long as Simeone is there, basically.
Now,
but in terms of the long term in other teams,
yes.
It's very, very difficult to say. I mean, Sevilla won the Europa League, and they look a good bet for that. If they can maybe keep hold of Rakitic and bring others in. And Valencia have just been taken over this past week by Philip Lim. So that's one to watch. They're going to be exciting to watch next season, Valencia.
Now, from a practical standpoint, Diego Costa comes out of that game against Barcelona. What is his status? What is the injury status for Atletico Madrid heading into the Champions League final?
I don't think Costa's going to make it. I think they're going to be without him by the looks of things. So in that case, it would be Adrian and David Villa who would possibly start if he is wanting to go for a duo. But no, Costa isn't going to make it at the moment. Definitely not.
And we're looking at that Madrid final. Should be fantastic. And while I have David on the line, we certainly need to turn, because once that final is over, attention goes to the World Cup as the European seasons wrap up. And Spain has named their provisional squad. They're obviously the defending champions. They have both of those recent Euro titles under their belt. They're taking a chance, and I know no European team has ever won a World Cup in South America, but we're only talking about 4 tournaments. David, is there a real sense that this Spanish team is still good enough to go and win another World Cup?
Yeah, I really do think so. I think it's in the interviews from some of the players that have been leading up in the past couple of weeks, and people have said, is the era over? They've been very bristly. They've been very spiky towards that. They're saying, why? Why would it be over? Right. If anything, we're getting stronger. Look at the club's success this year, for God's sake. We're a Spanish winner in the Europa League, and we're going to have one in the Champions League as well. It's not going to end. And I think the confidence is still very high, and that experienced group is still there. There's only going to be somebody like Puyol who isn't there. Obviously, he's a big miss, but people like Xavi and Iniesta, they are there. You could see Xavi Alonso, they're still there. And then we've got a few new players just started about, people like Koke, Diego Costa. These are new players who have come in to maybe invigorate. But if there was a slight hint of staleness there, then these players will shake it up a little bit. And if there's anything, there's more options now. And I still think they're in an excellent position to win it, most certainly, and confidence is really high, and the belief, and they believe they can go all the way.
We have the recent evidence. I mean, it's a year ago, but we have the recent evidence the Confederations Cup final as a potential to wonder just a little bit based on what Brazil did to Spain. Now, there aren't very many teams in the world capable of doing what Brazil did to Spain last year, and they still have immense talent. I guess maybe in a way you could argue that while they may be bristling at the idea that it's over, the lack of belief could work in their favor, a little less pressure on Spain this time around?
Yeah, possibly. I think there's just going to be the pressure on Brazil is just so intense. And Neymar, obviously, who plays in Spain for Barcelona, I think the pressure on him is being the icon of the whole tournament, isn't he? And for him, that's a lot of taking his shoulders. So who knows? That could, maybe the spotlight is actually straight away from Spain in that sense. And I think that could play massive. I think if they can just get on with their work under the radar, I know it sounds difficult because they're Spain and the world and European champions. If they can just do it maybe under the radar from all the pressure that will be on Brazil and intensity in the press, then I think that would be a massive bonus, definitely. But I think the big key is as well that Spain finds a new player in this group who really comes out, whether that's Diego Costa or Koke, as we've mentioned, or possibly Thiago. I think it's really important that they actually do find a player who can come out of this new generation and come in and be a star this tournament. I think that is important more than anything for Spain.
Now, you look. I mean, people don't need me to go through this roster with the amount of star power that's in it. I mean, you know these players, but as you said, there are some coming in, and I suppose that's as important to how Xavi plays as to whether or not Spain can actually lift this trophy in Brazil, again, with the Brazil threat, with Argentina being as good as they are, with Germany and Italy and the usual suspects.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Xavi is going to be massively key in that, and how he's used and how he's protected. So if Xavi can maybe play 60, 75 minutes, okay, and then somebody else can come in and take the reins in in the same role, that would be fantastic as well, because I don't think Xavi's going to be as influential as he has been in past tournaments. I think there's a realization of that. But the options are there. I mean, Thiago Alcantara has ended the season unbelievably with Bayern Munich, absolutely fantastically. And I think he should have the throne of Barcelona, and for whatever reason he hasn't been, many, many reasons why. And I think he can be somebody for Spain for the future who can really control. And I think it could be his time. I think somebody like Thiago, I think he's the man I'm probably looking at when I'm saying there needs to be somebody to break out, and I think he could be the person too.
Now, Thiago has a knee injury. Is that have you seen his status? Because I believe he may not make the World Cup based on what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's very 50-50. I think Del Bosque is such a massive fan of him. I mean, Isco didn't even make the squad. Mm-hmm. So, so he's pinning everything on Thiago, maybe making it. And if not, then there's somebody like Koke. I think there's just going to be a new player for Spain that they are really going to look to and break through. So Koke, Thiago, they can be the two maybe that they stand out. If Thiago doesn't make it, then Koke. Sure. I think even Diego Costa is going to be more of an impact player than an actual starter as well.
Well, actually, bring me to Diego Costa. How does Diego Costa's presence? I mean, it's not that you look Fernando Torres. Okay. Obviously people want to make jokes and he didn't score a ton of goals. He hasn't scored a ton of goals at Chelsea. He scored some crucial goals, just not a lot of them. We know what David Villa can do, what he's 32, maybe on the back end of it. How does Costa's presence change the way Del Bosque will put the team out?
I think it's interesting. I think everybody's been even to say, look, he's a nice guy, really. He's misinterpreted to the press, and I think he has calmed down a lot. And his presence it's an interesting factor, and I almost feel like he could have a motivational effect on a lot of players. I think if he comes in, he's so aggressive in the way he plays, and he's so passionate. And I mean, this is a guy who he isn't your traditional Spanish player. Obviously, everybody knows everything with the nationality issue with Brazil. But I think he just wants win so badly and wants to compete, I think he's going to have a fantastic effect on the squad, as opposed to an adverse effect of maybe disrupting things.
Spain, if I'm correct, are the bettors' favorites, maybe behind Brazil. I haven't really checked it. I'm not a bettor, David, but I imagine that within Spain, there's obviously a lot of expectations remaining, whether the spotlight internationally is on them or not. So do you have them winning this from your perspective?
It's difficult. It's very difficult to say. It's such a really big call to make, and I think there's part of you thinks they're going to fall short because they play so much football across the course of the season and factors like that. So I can see them making the final, and then after that, I don't know. I'm going to really sit on the fence and say I think they'll make the final. Whether they'll win it, I'm not really too sure.
No, we could do with the Spain-Brazil final. I'm not even sure if it works out that way, because you would certainly expect Spain to win their group, and then from there, it's all about the draw in the knockout rounds. David Cartledge talking Spanish football, La Liga, and the Spanish national team. Thank you very much for your time. Follow David on Twitter, David JACA. He's all over the place. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thanks a lot. As usual.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we will grab Andrew Mangan from Arsblog, and we will do a recap of Arsenal season as they lift the FA Cup. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV, soccermorning.com. Support the show.
Get down! Get down! Get down! Get down! Get down!
Two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, joined now by our friend Andrew Mangan from Arsblog, here to talk about the good times, because Arsenal are FA Cup champions. Andrew, congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
How does it feel? I mean, I could make jokes. I'm not going to. I'm going to leave those aside. But the trophy drought was a thing that hung over Arsenal fans' heads, especially when other fans would happily throw it in their faces. How does it feel to have Arsenal lifting a trophy today?
Well, it's fantastic. I mean, it's really what football's all about, isn't it? So to be beyond that trophy drought thing that you mentioned, which is something that it's not just opposition fans, but it's been a story in the media for so long. It grew into something, I won't say maybe cancerous is overdoing it a little bit, but It genuinely was a weight around everybody's neck. And I think that you could see that in the final and in the semi-final against Wigan, where the pressure and the expectation on Arsenal to win those games against opposition you would generally fancy them to win. They made a hard work of it in both those games, but having gone beyond that, it's absolutely fantastic. I was there on Saturday. It was amazing to be in the stadium with all the other Arsenal fans, and afterwards to celebrate with people from all over the world who had come to London to view the game. And it's easy to forget how much fun it is winning something, especially after so long.
I think that is certainly true for Arsene Wenger. And if you were in the building, perhaps you did not get as good of a look as I did on television, but he looked like a man who was shedding a gigantic weight from his shoulders. I mean, I'm not, he's obviously at this point as an older gentleman, he's not always put together the best, but he sort of looked like somebody who was certainly relieved to finally have a trophy to hold up and celebrate. Yeah,
I mean, I think you could almost see the day after. He looks younger and fresher, and I think nobody felt the pressure more than him, simply because he is ultimately the man responsible for whether or not Arsenal win trophies. He looked like he really enjoyed himself on the day afterwards. Of course, I mean, it wasn't the most comprehensive victory. It maybe wasn't convincing in some ways. Some of the flaws that have affected Arsenal all season were obvious in the game, but really it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you win it once you win it. And from that moment on, I think everybody just was quite happy to celebrate and enjoy it for what it is.
Were you happy that it did not go to penalties?
Yeah, of course.
Too nerve-wracking to have it come down to spot kicks, I imagine.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would have been relatively confident, but, having come through a penalty shootout in the semi-final against Wigan, I won't say we'd used up all our luck, but obviously you prefer to win it in without having to do that. And thankfully, Aaron Ramsey popped up with a fantastic goal. And I think a goal that was worthy of winning any final.
It's interesting that Aaron Ramsey scores the goal that wins Arsenal the FA Cup, considering that his absence for a large stretch of the season was sort of pointed to as a reason Arsenal wasn't able to maintain the consistency that they started out the campaign with and the actual title chase. There's some poetic justice to that in a way.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, he's just been rewarded for being Arsenal's best player, their most consistent player, their most dangerous player, and somebody who, from the first day of the season, has always tried to make things happen. And I think sometimes you get rewarded for that. A player who is static on the pitch, unless he gets a bit of luck, isn't going to do very much. But a player who moves around and tries to make things happen, more often than not, is going to be in a position where he can do the opposition some damage. And I think there was maybe 3 or 4 opportunities for him in injury time or in extra time alone, because he smacked a couple over the bar and the keeper saved one. And, he just kept going and he kept going and he put himself in those positions. And thankfully, he teamed up very well with Olivier Giroud. The back heel from Giroud was fantastic. And the finish, improvised, but one of real quality and one, like I say, I think it deserved to win the final for Arsenal.
Now, we have to be careful about results-based analysis, Andrew, but Arsene Wenger kept 2 substitutes back, ends up putting Rosicky and Wilshere on in extra time. At the when regulation, when the 90 minutes is up and the score is tied, and you see that there are 2 substitutes left in Arsenal's chamber, were you a little surprised by that?
Maybe, but I could see why he didn't as well. I mean, he took off Mesut Ozil and Santi Cazorla, so 2 absolutely fantastic players. Cazorla, I thought, was fantastic on the day. Ozil was a little bit quiet, but I could see why he didn't take them off. I don't think he had Ozil marked down for a penalty from what he said afterwards. He's missed a couple of penalties this season, and I think to expect him to turn that around in a penalty shootout, I can understand why he took him off. But look, he's put on Wilshere and he's put on Rosicky, and they made a difference as well. In terms of what they gave to Arsenal driving forward, a little bit more energy, very difficult for Hull to cope with because they had been, since Arsenal equalised, very much on the back foot. They were trying to stay in the game, but were being worked very, very hard. So I guess the last thing you want is 2 players with fresh legs coming on and running directly at you. That's difficult to cope with. So I think perhaps he made those changes at the right time.
Now, when Arsenal is down 2-0 in the early going, where is your stomach in that moment?
Yeah, it wasn't in a good place. But the only thing about it was that it was so early that Arsenal, they had a lot of time to work it out. So If you're 2-0 down with half an hour to play, then you start getting really worried. But 2-0 down after 8 minutes, as long as you can consolidate and not concede anymore, then at least you have the time to turn it around. And that's what they did. I thought the timing of the Cazorla goal was really, really important. They needed to get back into the game relatively quickly. So it was, I think, maybe 10 minutes after Hull's second goal. So that immediately then would have put a little bit of worry in their minds. And it was a little bit late coming, the second goal, the equalizer from Koscielny. But yeah, I mean, look, as I said, it was just one of those things, the flaws that Arsenal have sometimes starting games. They're a bit too slow, whether they're nervous. I thought perhaps it was not necessarily the goalkeeper's fault, but in the league game between Hull and Arsenal a couple of weeks back, they were threatening from set pieces. And the difference was Wojciech Szczesny was in goal, and he came and he claimed a lot of these crosses and he dominated his area, whereas Fabianski tends to stay on his line a lot more. So I do wonder what might have happened if Szczesny was in goal, whether they would have taken that lead. But look, they worked it out in the end.
Yeah, Fabianski, a couple of heart attack moments as well. I mean, this was from a neutral's perspective a brilliant FA Cup FA Cup final, because it brought back and forth, and obviously Hull with a 2-goal lead to start was a surprise, and Arsenal with the comeback and the win. Now, Andrew, any season with a trophy is a good season, and so with Arsenal getting into the Champions League places again, you can put a bow on this campaign and say, yes, we've had some different aspirations, but all in all, this was a strong season. And anybody else would trade places outside of the top three would trade places with Arsenal in a second. So when you look ahead, and we've heard plenty of talk about Arsene Wenger signing an extension probably very soon. He says he expects it in the aftermath of that game. What do you see? And is this a launching point for the club after getting over the quote-unquote drought?
Yeah, I think it has to be. They really have to build on it, because one of the frustrations that many Arsenal fans have experienced over the last couple of years is that we've seemed to take a step forward here and there, but not built on it. And we've ended up taking a step backwards. So this season, I think that the league campaign was ultimately disappointing. But if you look back on it and analyze it a little bit more objectively, it's impossible to deny that there was some progress, because they were top of the table for a long time. It's the first time it's happened in years. They were in the title challenge. Yes, it failed and it faded away. And that was a big frustration, because you felt that perhaps the club didn't do enough to make sure that the challenge could be maintained right to the end of the season. But I think what they have to do now is look at the fact that they have a trophy under their belts. That pressure is gone. It's gone. So it's a little bit liberating. I think they'll be full of confidence. They'll feel better about themselves as a team and as players. And what they also have is a huge amount of resources at their disposal. They've got new sponsorship money coming from Emirates, from Puma. They've got money in the bank already. They're a club that sells out pretty much week in, week out. So the money is there to really give this team an injection of extra quality that will help it do better in the league next season and hopefully go all the way. So I'm hopeful that they will learn and that they will take a step forward and make sure that what they've done this season isn't just a one-off.
No, it's ridiculous on anyone's part to suggest Arsene Wenger has not done enough or does not deserve to stay as long as he wants. And we've discussed this before, Andrew, but when you have the expectations of a club like Arsenal, when you are supposed to be challenging for titles and things come up short, people obviously ask about it. This trophy is some pressure off. I mean, we just had the 10-year anniversary of the Invincibles. That kind of reminds you again what Arsene Wenger has achieved at this club. So when you look at him staying on, I imagine it's hard to argue that's not the best thing for Arsenal. Continuity is a plus in this game, but he needs to be part of this process that is putting new talents into this team.
Mm-hmm. I think as well you have to look at the overall picture. People tend to think that if you sack a manager, the next guy is going to come in and be better immediately. just because he's different, people like it. I think there are things that Arsenal need to work on during the next few years of Arsene Wenger when he signs his new contract, because what we've got is something unusual at Arsenal, that we have this one man who is like, I don't want to say the king, but he controls pretty much everything at that football club. He manages the entire football club, whereas you see other clubs and they've got a head of the sporting director and a head of recruitment, and they've got various structures in place so that it's easier for them to change their coach, because that's all they have to do. But when you remove a manager like Arsene Wenger, and when you remove a manager like Sir Alex Ferguson, as we saw last season, that the structures that are there have to be strong enough for the new man to be able to cope with, and for the club to be able to cope with. So I think part of his responsibility for the duration of this contract, which I would imagine will be his last contract, will be to ensure that these structures are in place for the man who eventually comes in and takes over from him. So it's a big job, both on the pitch and off the pitch, for Arsene Wenger.
There is a lesson to be learned in what's happened at Manchester United with Alex Ferguson departing and handpicking his successor, but it ultimately not working. And there is a philosophical argument, Andrew, and I'm not sure that I've ever heard your thoughts on this, and I apologize if you've expressed them elsewhere, but the idea of a sporting director, a director of football, somebody who is in charge of that element of recruitment, of bringing in players, of identifying players, because in this particular era of the game, it's very difficult for one man to do all that. Is Wenger, would he be wise, or would the club be wise to install someone next to him, perhaps not even on equal terms, but someone who can assist him in those roles?
Sorry about that noise. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be good. I mean, he did have David Dean alongside him, and you don't really have to scratch too far under the surface of opinion for very experienced people to say that he would probably work better with somebody like David Dean. The question, though, is it's one of authority and one of delegation. That how much can Arsene Wenger trust somebody? I don't think the relationship with Ivan Gazidis, I think it's fine, but I don't think it's in any way comparable to the relationship he had with David Dean, that they were friends. So there was an implicit trust between the two of them. And I think he finds it hard to give responsibility to other people if he doesn't quite trust them. He's one of the only managers in the world who still does all his coaching sessions. A lot of them, Sir Alex Ferguson very often didn't take training. He left that to his coaches. There's no way Arsene Wenger would do that. And he has such an influence over these decisions that are made about who is going to come in, at what price they're going to come in, how much they're going to pay that player. That I think it would be very difficult for him to work alongside somebody. But I do think that perhaps if Arsenal can find the right person to do that with him, then it would make the transition from the Wenger era into the new era a little more smooth.
Well, regardless of what the future holds, it's a good day to be an Arsenal fan. There is a trophy to place in the cabinet. The drought, as I said, and Andrew, I'm sure you're keenly aware of this. For most clubs, this is not a drought. That was a ridiculous idea. But of course, Arsenal comes with expectations, and I suppose for everybody, it's a matter of building on this now.
Yeah. I mean, sorry about this.
That's all right.
There's a postal machine beside me going mental. I just switched it off. Apologies. Yeah, it is. It's a step forward. After 9 years, we have a trophy. It has changed, I think, the way that people view the club, the way they view the manager. Many people doubted that he wouldn't necessarily be able to win a trophy again for the club. And I think the benefit to the players themselves, both in terms of how they fit in at Arsenal and also how they see themselves as potential winners of things in the future, that of course will be completely changed because they've had the experience of it. They've done it the hard way in the final. They've done it the hard way on the way there. They beat Spurs, they beat Everton, they beat Liverpool. on the way to the FA Cup final. So it wasn't as if they had an easy ride, even if the last two games were against teams that you would expect Arsenal to beat normally. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be taken from it, and it's all positive. I don't see the point in looking at this in anything other than a positive way, and it's up to the club now to see how they can build on that and make it more positive ahead of next season.
Andrew Bengen from Arseblog putting a cap on a season that saw Arsenal win a trophy. We thought we might never see the day again, and here it is. I'm sorry, Ed. I'm sorry, Andrew. Thank you very much for your time as always, sir.
Anytime.
All right, there goes Andrew Mangan from Arseblog. Excellent as always. Him of the deep baritone. I enjoy that every time. Phone lines are open. 347-756-6276 is your phone number. Questions, comments, concerns on anything that happened over the weekend. I have a late Friday news recap to do because apparently organizations want to drop news on Fridays when we have all shut our brains down here in America. And, this is when you bury news. It's very interesting to see when some organizations announce things on Friday. It's especially late in the afternoon. We had, or even in the afternoon period, whether it's late or not, you had a couple of things. You had financial fair play, punishments coming down for Manchester City and PSG, $80 million fines, big time fines, reduction of the squad for the Champions League for both sides from 25 to 21. They have a homegrown requirement, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of their Champions League squad as well. Now, when it comes to the fine, and this is something that was talked about on Friday, when it comes to the fine, my understanding is, and Jonathan Johnson is the man for this information when it comes to PSG, and plenty of outlets to get it for City. Most of that money can be returned or will be returned to the to the club, if they comply with financial fair play next season. There's also an element of some of the money being money that would be awarded through television contracts or European competition awards that won't be. So it may not be a straight, let me write an $80 million check, although we know that Mansour can do so at City, and we know the Qataris can do so at PSG. A little bit more complicated than that. Whether or not the teeth are sharp enough when it comes to financial fair play is in the eye of the beholder. It's a significantly looking punishment. But then again, we've talked about this. Financial fair play may not be just about pulling back those rich clubs who use outside money to fund their title charges, their European challenges, as both of these teams have. It's not just about whether or not Mansour took personal money and injected it in City, and City's not actually playing on a level field with everybody else, because they're clearly not. But that money may not be the target. The target could be sort of having an impact on transfer fees, pulling the market back a little bit. We have seen clubs spend $300 million, 300 million, whatever, pounds. That's obviously significantly more money than dollars on their clubs, on their rosters. And some of them have won things and some of them haven't. City and PSG are champions of their respective leagues, but they have yet to make their mark in Europe yet. We'll see if they can do so now that they've been hit by these sanctions. The other news that came out on Friday, I'm not really sure, I can't remember how late it was. Jill Ellis is your U.S. women's national team head coach, replacing Tom Sermani. The organization, U.S. Soccer, went through a search. A couple of candidates. They ultimately settled on Ellis. She is, my understanding is, she's the establishment choice. She is the choice that's going to make the players happy. If that's a good thing and leads to a World Cup title next year, then everybody will say it was a great hire. If it ultimately leads to the players, some of them, and there have been whispers, having too much power within that locker room, then we may see another disaster on some level. And of course, for the women, not winning the World Cup constitutes a disaster. They're going to Canada next year. They should qualify with no trouble. Canada's not in qualifying this time because they're hosts. So we'll see what happens with Jill Ellis. Also, we had today, this is not Friday news, this is today news that I saw. Didier Drogba is leaving Galatasaray, will now be in play as a free agent. Of course, the MLS rumors will pop up. I even saw a story today that said a Chelsea return could be in the works. Could be a possibility. But if Didier Drogba was considering MLS, and the team I saw him connected to was the Seattle Sounders, does that make sense on any level? I mean, obviously the Sounders would be happy to have Didier Drogba, just like any MLS team would. But you have Martins, you have Dempsey, you have Lamar Nagel, you have Marco Papa, you have plenty in attack. Where does Drogba fit? I mean, he's going to play center forward, but how does that impact what Dempsey ends up doing? How does that impact what Martins ends up doing? How does that impact their formation? I'm just saying, can they even get him under the cap? Somebody tell me whether that Sounders thing sounds like BS or not. Seems like it. Seems like it'll be. It seems like something that could not happen based on the MLS rules. They have 2 DPs, right? Am I wrong about that? Just Martins and Dempsey. There's not a third DP in that mix. Maybe they can't fit him in. Maybe he's going to go to the Galaxy. Everybody ends up going to the Galaxy. That could be a nice landing spot for Didier Drogba because, hey, it's Hollywood and there's famous people and that's where all the stars end up going. No, of course not. Not right now, anyway. I also saw a piece by Richard Deitch at Sports Illustrated this morning. He, of course, covers media news for the magazine. He has talked to Fox. He has talked to Fox about Gus Johnson. He has talked to Fox about Gus Johnson's partner being Eric Winaldo moving forward, that they see that as a long-term partnership. I don't know what you guys make of the partnership. We just heard them do an FA Cup final. They're going to do the Champions League final on Saturday. Mostly soccer fans, savage announcers. Mostly they savage announcers. And certainly Gus Johnson, being relatively new to the sport, being the type of announcer that he is, the guy who likes to yell, raise his voice on a regular basis, is not something that soccer fans are particularly used to. Unless you watch a lot of Spanish, soccer in Spanish. I watched the Liga MX final last night. The second leg. Leon, back-to-back champions in Mexico, by the way. So congratulations to them. Congratulations to everybody at Leon, except for Rafa Marquez, because I just can't bring myself to do that. But now he's got back-to-back titles, captaining that side. I watched that, and if you watch Liga MX or MLS with a Spanish broadcast, there's lots of yelling. There's lots of raised voices. There's lots of excitement, enthusiasm. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about people who speak English as their first language just not liking that over-exuberant element? Are we talking about there being a double standard when it comes to an American broadcast? I'm asking. I'm not saying Gus Johnson's good at his job yet when it comes to soccer. I do think he's getting better. But what is it? There's also a little bit of chatter out there. I point you in the direction of Awful Announcing, where Matt Yoder has a piece that says MLS is the perfect place for Gus Johnson to go and hone his craft as a soccer play-by-play announcer. Obviously, Fox is entering back into the MLS fray next season as they get one of those Sunday night games. If you're an MLS fan, will you avoid Fox MLS broadcasts if Gus Johnson is on the call? I want to know. That's right. Ozzy Alonso is a DP. Thank you, Freddie Shires on Twitter. I want to know if people are honestly so turned off by Gus Johnson that they'll avoid a broadcast. How important? Where's your breaking point? How important is an announcer? How much do you care? You have a mute button. I know that takes out the stadium noise. I know that's terrible for some people. You got to get the atmosphere. But how important is it? Because this comes back to the World Cup in 2018, for which Gus Johnson has been handpicked to call. Will you avoid the World Cup because Gus Johnson's not great? Is he bad? Again, eye of the beholder. But will you avoid these games because Gus Johnson? I'm not suggesting that they shouldn't try to get better. Obviously, Fox is going in a much different direction than we've seen ESPN. People will say, after the Dave O'Brien disaster in 2006, the smartest thing ESPN did was flip their coverage around and cater to the soccer fan. Cater to those soccer initiates who, for the most part, and yeah, dead horse, I'm sorry, are tuned to a British call. They enjoy a British accent on their call. ESPN said, we're going to go whole hog on this. this is the direction we're going to go. Because rather than sort of sort out, well, what's the balance here? We can have a little bit of American and a little bit of English and we'll figure it out. No, just push there are plenty of English announcers out there. They're very good at their jobs. Push all your chips into that area. Buy in on the idea that soccer fans will enjoy the British call and then everybody else can sort of come along for the ride because they haven't formed an opinion yet. If you're a casual soccer fan or only a World Cup watcher, why does it matter? And everybody lauds ESPN for their coverage. It's not just about the announcers, but that's certainly a significant part of it. Fox is going to go the other direction, but not with an American who knows the game, with an American who just came to the game, who says he watches 4 to 5 matches a week. Means something, right? He's trying. Continues to try. Working at it. Maybe getting better. Eric Winalda. Is he the guy to partner with Gus Johnson and help Gus Johnson get better at this? I don't know that I really noticed the FA Cup final call. I had it on. I had the volume up. I was doing some other things and watching and doing other stuff. It's obviously a morning in my household, and I got a kid and a wife. I know Eric Winalda did identify Aaron Ramsey as English when he is certainly not English. So that was one thing. But I don't know that I noticed it. I don't know that I said to myself, well, that's terrible. That's bad. And maybe that's a sign of improvement, or maybe I'm just not the critic that people should be paying attention to. I'm willing to give Gus Johnson a go at this. And again, it wasn't like he was going to be good straight out of the gate. He was going to have a rough period. It's going to take him a while to learn the game and the rhythm. I still don't think he's got the rhythm down. And I sort of talked about this on Friday. But are you going to avoid Fox games for MLS if it's Gus Johnson? Because that's different. That's not a final. That's not a Champions League final. That's not a World Cup. There is less pressure to watch the game if it's an MLS Sunday night event and, oh, look, it's Columbus and New York. It's DC United and Montreal. It's RSL and FC Dallas. Sunday night game on Fox. Gus Johnson's on the call. Click. Don't know. All right, that's going to do it for Soccer Morning on a Monday. Strong show out of the gates. Charlie Boehm, David Cartledge, Andrew Mangan, all with fantastic insight on their relative areas of expertise. I will point you in the direction of soccermorning.com. This show, listener supported. We're working on some stuff. Very excited for the World Cup. But if you need you guys to help support the show, soccermorning.com is where you go. And again, for anybody who missed it, NASN.TV is down right now. That is a temporary problem. We are working to fix it. We're moving servers. It'll all be straightened out in the near future. I am promised that will be taken care of. That is going to be taken care of, and we should be fine. All right. Again, thanks to our guest today. Thanks to everybody on Twitter. Follow us at soccermorning.com. We'll have more time for calls tomorrow, maybe. Because the European seasons are over. There's nothing else to talk about. Well, Champions League final, and we'll build up to that. But you got your champions in England and Spain and Germany and Italy and France. Can't go through that anymore. It's MLS and World Cup. All right. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.